Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Amarachi Ubani. On the program this week, the United States and Iran agree a conditional 2-week ceasefire with the Strait of Hormuz reopened to shipping. Plus, in Lebanon, Christians mark Easter in somber observance. Many displaced and far from home as fighting continues. The United States and Iran announced on Tuesday they have agreed to a conditional 2-week ceasefire, with Tehran promising safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical shipping routes. The pause follows weeks of coordinated U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran and retaliatory attacks across the region.
In Tehran, there were scenes of celebration after the ceasefire was announced. Supporters waved Iranian flags as traffic flowed through the capital, and many welcomed what they hope is a pause in the bombing. The deal was announced by U.S. President Donald Trump, who said the United States would suspend bombing Iran for 2 weeks on the condition that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened fully and immediately. Just hours earlier, Trump had issued an extraordinary threat, warning that a whole civilization will die tonight if Iran did not comply, language that drew condemnation at the United Nations.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, deplores the tirade, incendiary rhetoric being used in the Middle East war over the last couple of weeks by all parties, including the latest threats to annihilate a whole civilization and to target civilian infrastructure. This is sickening. Carrying through on such threats amounts to the most serious international crimes. Threats that spread fear and terror among civilians are unacceptable and must cease immediately. Under international law, deliberately attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure is a war crime.
The ceasefire comes more than a month after the war began on the 28th of February, when the U.S. and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran, triggering retaliatory attacks and disruptions to regional shipping routes. And while the ceasefire is being welcomed by many, the civilian toll remains a flashpoint, especially after the strike on a girls' school in Minab. Amnesty International says 168 people were killed, including more than 100 children. U.S. officials say the incident is still under investigation.
The bombing of Shajareh Tayyebe Elementary School in Minab evoked a visceral horror. The images of bombed-out classrooms and grieving parents showed clearly who pays the highest price for war. Civilians with no power in the decisions that led to conflict. Whatever differences countries have, we can all agree they will not be solved by killing schoolchildren. In the case of this school, the onus is on those who carried out the attack to investigate it promptly, impartially, transparently, and thoroughly, to determine the facts and lay the basis for accountability. Senior US officials have said the strike is under investigation. I call for that process to be concluded as soon as possible and for its findings to be made public. There must be justice for the terrible harm done.
In London, demonstrators gathered outside the US Embassy for a vigil honoring the children killed in Minab.
I think the massacre itself is symbolic and outlines the intentions of the US and Zionist entity.
And this is a war of choice. Like, well, Iran, it's their existential, their health infrastructure, their state, their sovereignty at stake. And we just need a world which respects global South sovereignty.
Shut it down! And we will fight your rich man's war!
And in Washington, anti-war protesters rallied outside the White House ahead of Trump's deadline, accusing the administration of pushing the region closer to catastrophe.
I'm here in front of the White House to stand up and speak up against Trump and his genocidal statement to obliterate the entire civilization of the Iranian people. My mother is from Iran. I have family members in Iran. We try to reach out to them as much as we can and hear back, and every day is a heart attack because we just don't know who made it and what's happened and where it got bombed. So we're always on pins and needles. It's our taxpayer money that's going to drop these bombs, which is even more heart-wrenching.
I am here against the war on Iran. I believe that the American people do not need to be footing this war. I believe that this war is for resources like oil, and that the money is being funneled into the wrong place with the government. We need to start putting the American money back home.
For now, as talks get underway, Iranian proposals reported to be on the table include sanctions relief, a war loss compensation fund, potential changes to U.S. troop deployments in the Gulf, and recognition of Iran's right to enrich uranium in exchange for a pledge not to develop nuclear weapons. It remains unclear which, if any, of these elements the United States is willing to accept.
In southern Lebanon, Christians have marked Easter in somber prayers as Israeli strikes continue and more families are forced from their homes. UN agencies warn the displacement crisis has now passed the 1 million mark, with health risks rising fast inside overcrowded shelters.
A child rings the church bell at Our Lady of the Sea in Tyre. Inside, Easter Mass begins, but the mood is heavy. Worshippers stand shoulder to shoulder in prayer as the war continues to cast a long shadow over the south.
This year, Easter feels heavy with sorrow. Normally, the whole family gathers together, but this time each of us is in a different place, and we are not together.
Still, with God's will, the flames of war will soon be put out. Peace will prevail, and this joy will once again fill everyone's hearts.
The service came amid a sharp escalation in the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, with Israeli strikes hitting multiple areas across the country. On Easter Sunday, at least 11 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes, including a child. UNHCR says more than 1 million people have been internally displaced in Lebanon since the 2nd of March.
The numbers for Lebanon that we have been updating you as we said, has crossed the 1 million mark. So these are IDPs who are displaced inside Lebanon. We also have had nearly 200,000 Syrians that have left Lebanon and arrived into Syria, and with those also nearly 32,000 Lebanese that have arrived also in Syria.
Families living in shelters are facing challenging conditions, including limited access to safe water, food, and essential health services, factors that increase the risk of illness and vulnerability, particularly among children, older persons, and those with chronic conditions.
Displacement is driving rising risks of infectious diseases, including measles, hepatitis A, and acute diarrheal diseases, particularly in overcrowded shelter situations. Children are disproportionately affected, making up around 1/3 of the displaced people, with tens of thousands already living in shelters under increasingly fragile conditions.
Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health reports at least 1,461 deaths, including 129 children and more than 4,400 injuries since the conflict resumed, with deaths rising sharply in recent days. The World Health Organization is warning against a dangerous normalization of attacks on care.
We cannot normalize the attacks on healthcare. The fact that over 50 healthcare workers have already lost their lives in this crisis is not normal. The fact that 1 million people are displaced is not normal. The fact that hospitals are working at over 100% occupied capacity is not normal. So we have to raise our voices for them, but critically, we have to put our hands down, work with the people, work with the government, and make sure that we support Lebanon to restore the normalcy in society.
Tensions in Lebanon escalated after Hezbollah intervened following the assassination of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, launching attacks against Israeli forces, who responded with strikes on southern villages and Beirut's southern suburbs. Israel was also carrying out near-daily strikes on Hezbollah across Lebanon before that, despite a ceasefire that was agreed in 2024, accusing the group of trying to recover its military capabilities.
In Gaza City, the territory's small Christian community has also marked Holy Week and Easter with prayers for peace in what worshippers describe as a rare moment of celebration since the ceasefire took effect last October. But church leaders say the danger has not disappeared, with strikes and insecurity still shadowing daily life across the Strip.
Inside the Holy Family Latin Parish, Catholics gathered over the weekend to mark Easter, lighting the Paschal flame and candles and joining prayers during Mass. For a community that has spent years under bombardment and displacement, even a limited celebration felt significant.
Okay. For nearly 2 years, our holiday celebrations were disrupted by the war. It is a blessing that this Easter we could feel some joy, even if only in a limited way.
The parish priest says the ceasefire has brought a measure of calm, but not an end to fear.
From Gaza, the small message in this holy day, we celebrate the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ in Jerusalem. We ask for these people, for Palestinian people, especially for Gaza, the possibility to live with honor, with simplicity. Unfortunately, the war is continuous. Even if the ceasefire is on, but the danger and the death is continuous.
Gaza's Christian population is tiny, around 1,000 people in a territory of roughly 2 million, mostly Greek Orthodox with smaller Latin Catholic and other communities.
We thank God that we are celebrating under better conditions than in previous years. In the past, feasts were marked by war, heavy shelling, and attacks on churches that prevented us from celebrating. Thank God, attendance has increased slightly because the current situation has become relatively calm.
The ceasefire that began in October has remained fragile, with Israel and Hamas repeatedly accusing each other of violations. More than 700 Palestinians and 4 Israeli soldiers have reportedly been killed since the truce began.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in a moment, we'll have more from Gaza. Plus, Rwanda begins 100 days of remembrance, marking 32 years since the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Do stay with us.
channels.
Thanks for staying with us. We're still in Gaza, where the ceasefire has not brought recovery. 6 months on, families are still living in tents, children are carrying adult burdens, and doctors warn the health system is edging closer to collapse under shortages and rising disease. Against that backdrop, a small choir project in Han Yunis is giving displaced girls a rare space to feel like children again, even for an hour.
Inside a tent at Al-Mawasi displacement camp in Khan Yunis, a group of girls stand shoulder to shoulder, practicing songs they know by heart. It is not a concert, it is a coping mechanism. They sing patriotic classics, trying to drown out the daily grind of life in a camp where water runs a routine, meals depend on free kitchens, and childhood has been replaced by survival.
يلا مع بعض 3 2 1 جو. نحن الثورة والغضب، نحن أمل الأجيال، منها تاريخ الأبطال، فجر اللي طالع نحن والسيف القاطع نحن، فجر اللي طالع نحن أمل الأجيال، من هون من عيننا انكتب تاريخ الأبطال.
Jihad Hassan, artist and project founder, says the project is aimed at easing the mental strain on girls carrying responsibilities far beyond their age.
They bear heavy responsibilities, leading to mental health deterioration and built up unreleased negative energy. I established this team to support them psychologically and clear deep-rooted negative energy.
For the girls, it is one of the few places where they can simply breathe.
Here I vent the negative deep energy. In the tent, I am grappling with hard tasks, including fetching water and going to bakeries. But here I live my childhood.
The United Nations says Gaza's children are deeply traumatized, warning of a worsening mental health emergency and rising malnutrition among the youngest.
Go.
And as families search for small pockets of normal life, the health crisis continues to deepen. Across Gaza City, doctors say hospitals and clinics are still operating in acute dysfunction, with shortages of medicines, equipment and electricity, even more than 6 months after the ceasefire began. At Al-Shifa Medical Complex, one of Gaza's largest hospitals, the impact of the war is visible in damaged buildings and reduced capacity. Health workers warn the crisis has spread beyond treating the wounded and now touches almost every medical specialty.
The health situation is catastrophic. We are now facing multiple challenges across various medical specialties, not only in dealing with injuries. There are major difficulties with cancer patients, as medicines have become extremely scarce, and what is available does not exceed 15% of the total medications these patients need. There are also other environmental problems. We are now beginning to face a rodent problem and the additional health risks that may result from it due to the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of tons of rubble and thousands of tons of garbage spread across Gaza City.
At this school, now functioning as both a displacement center and a basic clinic, patients line up daily for whatever is available, often no more than first aid and pain relief.
I am forced to visit this medical point almost daily because of chronic illnesses. The services go little beyond first aid or simple painkillers. We can't find the medicines we need.
We receive between 150 and 200 cases every day. Skin and respiratory diseases are spreading, and the scale of need far exceeds our ability to respond.
Local authorities say airstrikes, shelling and gunfire have continued in multiple areas during the ceasefire period, adding to casualties and keeping pressure on a health system with little room left.
Rwanda has opened its annual commemoration week for the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi marking 32 years since the killings. In Kigali, President Paul Kagame and First Lady Jeanette Kagame lit the flame of remembrance at the Kigali Genocide Memorial, where more than 250,000 victims are buried.
At Kigali Genocide Memorial, silence, grief, and memory. President Paul Kagame and First Lady Jeanette Kagame stepped forward to light the flame of remembrance, a torch that will burn for 100 days, mirroring the duration of the genocide. Around them, survivors, families of victims, and diplomats gathered where more than 250,000 people are laid to rest. In an address to the nation, Kagame warned against attempts to manipulate the history of the genocide and insisted Rwanda would defend its right to exist.
The Rwanda you see today cannot die a second time. Before you kill it, it will kill you first. We will live with dignity as we should, and we will not ask anyone for the right to live.
His remarks come as tensions escalate in the neighboring Democratic Republic of the Congo, with Kigali and Kinshasa repeatedly accusing one another of backing armed groups across the border.
This day again serves as a reminder to all of us that some of the leadership of those who committed genocide remain at large and all over the world and across our border in some eastern part of DRC. They transformed themselves into a genocide organization, now known as FDLR. It is now acts as an ideological center of gravity for the numerous genocidal coalition forces operating in that part of our Great Lakes. Their hate speech and genocide ideology continue to spread and to inflame divisions, specifically targeting native Tutsis communities in that part of our region. We are witnessing the same rhetoric that once paved the way to the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda in 1994.
For survivors, the commemoration is also about remembering what was lost and what has changed since.
C'est une comparaison.
If we compare, the difference is 1,000 times better than before. Because in 1994, there was nothing. There was fire everywhere. Houses were destroyed. There were widows and orphans. Children were not going to school. There was nothing good. Everything was dark. 32 years later, it is clear that everything is better.
At the United Nations, officials used the anniversary to issue a wider warning about the return of dangerous rhetoric and the cost of inaction, urging countries to strengthen genocide prevention and accountability.
The ancient toxins of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, and anti-Muslim bigotry are once again corroding our political discourse. We hear outright denial. We hear distortion. We even hear the glorification of past genocides. The genocide against the Tutsi shows us where this path can lead, when words are weaponized and the world waits too long to respond. We must do more than remember the dead. We must protect the living by defending truth and rejecting narratives that make violence seem acceptable.
It is our solemn duty to remember the victims, honor their resilience, and ensure that their stories are forever etched into our collective memory. By doing so, we not only pay tribute to those who suffered, but also lay the foundation for preventing such atrocities in the future. It is equally troubling that some countries continue to provide a safe haven to genocide suspects. Rwanda's position is very clear. Those responsible must be extradited to Rwanda or prosecuted wherever they are found. After all, we are told and informed by the Genocide Convention that genocide is a crime that transcends borders and justice must follow suit.
The genocide began after the plane carrying Rwanda's then-President Juvenal Habyarimana was shot down on the 6th of April 1994. What followed was mass slaughter carried out largely by extremist Hutu forces and militias. Over roughly 100 days, more than 1 million people were killed, the majority of them Tutsi, along with Hutu and others who opposed the violence.
That's the program today. Remember, you can catch all our tough stories and more on channelstv.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Bye for now.